Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales, featuring Michael St. John, Pat Trammell, and special guests.
You know, that's not a very professional way to start a program. But what I was thinking? I was thinking there's absolutely no better way that's ever opened a program in the history of mankind than the way Lance Russell did it. Yellow again, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside, all ready to go with another big week of championship wrestling. That's real important because one of the very first things that I ever heard one Saturday morning on Channel 13 from 469, 489, 499, whatever, Highland Drive in Memphis, Tennessee, there was Lance Russell. And back in the Channel 13 days, the greatest wrestling announcer of them all, first we saw the jingle that said, that sung, "It's America's favorite sport on WHBQ television." Then it was Lance Russell. Yellow again, everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside for another week of Channel 13 Studio Wrestling. Man, it gives me chills thinking about it. It gives me chills. It gives me goosebumps. The first time I heard it, who would have known that I would have been obsessed with Memphis wrestling for the rest of my life? And there's no doubt about it. Somebody that I knew in the 70s, which will be the subject is what we talk about today. I didn't know Adam Dunn in the 70s. I know Adam Dunn now. Talk to Adam Dunn every day. Some of you folks watching today, I didn't know you in the 70s. As much as I love Panetta, the first lady, I didn't know Panetta in the 1970s. But by gosh and by golly, by cracky, I knew Randy Dandy, Randy West. There's no doubt about it. Now, we're going to ask Adam Dunn, because Adam, I've just figured out, you asked the question, where's our guest? I forgot to send the darn deal. I forgot to send the darn link. So either you come on the screen with your profile picture and you talk to people and you read the comments from the people while I go ahead and say hi to Al. Before we get into the heart of this, Adam, if you could either send that email, or it's easy for me to do it because I have Pat's email that is direct to. She might be here too, but we need to send it to Michael. So if you come on the screen with your profile picture so I can do that. Can you do that? As Adam is not responding to me,
Yeah,
telling me.
I was pulling up the email to send it to them.
All right, so Pat, I think is talking Memphis TMW. I don't even think you have his deal. Do you?
Uh, yeah, PB Todd at
No,
Gmail.
no, that's not it. This is not good television as we talk about the 70s. Uh, so, yeah, it's TMW PBTide at gmail.com.
That's what I got.
And Pat or Michael is
I've got Michael's. Yeah.
okay. So we will get that done. We hear your voice, so why don't you go ahead and say yellow again, everybody, to the peoples? You need to talk to the peoples a little bit.
Yellow again, everybody. Welcome right along ringside for another big day of championship wrestling. How
Hey,
about
how
that?
about Randy Dandy? Randy West is in the house today. Carrie is in the house. Hello, Gary, hadn't seen you in a while. Al is saying hi to me, you, and everybody else. Tony Edwards is saying hello, and I appreciate it from everybody.
And
Man,
you know,
oh, go ahead.
you talk about putting a graphic on the screen that we used to see every Saturday. How about that?
All right. Yeah, that is cool. I wish you could let it go flippy
Let it,
flop.
yeah, let it spin. Yeah.
Now, Tanner was on earlier in my preview deal, and it's certainly good to see Tanner back. We had Al on the preview show, and I think Randy West was taking a nap. Man, I am excited about this show. There is no doubt about it, but I'll tell you exactly what's going on. Pat's out of town. Pat thinks he'll be back into the show at a meeting in Atlanta. We're not positive for sure about Pat. I didn't do him any favors by not sending an email. Now, Michael, same thing. He said he was going to be in 5 minutes late, but if I have to do this show by myself, I will. Adam can make the save as far as talking and having his profile picture up here, but he is not in Studio A. He's in Studio B. And the problem with Studio B is now that he has Studio A, there's no camera in Studio B. Am I correct on that, Adam?
Correct. Yeah, Studio B is a desktop computer, and I have the camera that I used to use in here is now in the master control room.
Well, we're looking forward because I'm as excited as I can be to take this show back to its roots. I want to tell everybody, remind everybody, tell you one more time as Jeremy Gibson is in the house, and I appreciate that. And Tony loves and I'm going to have to tell Adam to tell this story because Al mentioned Johnny Cash, and I didn't even know I was wearing a Johnny Cash shirt. And the first thing you said, tell the peoples, Adam, tell the peoples the first thing you said to me when we had our production meeting.
So the first thing I said when I came on when we had our pre-production meeting tonight is I said, "Well, Randy, your camera's backwards." And the way that I actually noticed it wasn't even the shirt. I just noticed that the statue was on the wrong side. And then I noticed the shirt. And so I said, I wonder if when you did that show earlier, if the camera was backwards. And then we went back and watched it. And sure enough, it was.
Well, you're in charge of my production, and you know how I feel on this, but I'll ask you, I'll let you go ahead and answer Tanner's problem or
Yeah,
question. He
I
says, "Hey,
will.
Randy, have you thought of getting a tabletop microphone to use?" So go ahead and answer that. As far as I know, this audio,
Well,
this is an expensive microphone, first of all, probably more expensive than Adam's microphone. It didn't look as good visible, but I don't care if it looks good. I want it to sound
well,
good. Now answer the question.
well, Randy, I think you can answer the question by just picking it up.
I showed it to the people the other day. See, that's my microphone.
So you have a tabletop microphone.
Yeah. What was I thinking? I think he was talking. You don't even have a tabletop. You have a hanging microphone in the other studio.
Uh, yeah, in the other studio, yeah, and right now I'm just wearing a headset with a microphone.
So Andrew Calvin Jr. says, ladies and
Ladies and gentlemen,
gentlemen, the owner, the founder, and the president, Randy Hales. And then he says, hello, my friend. And then Carrie says, Randy looks like a Mike. What does that say, Adam? You're my
looks like a
producer.
nice set of AKG headphones that you're wearing.
I don't know what they are. What are they, Adam?
Well, yep, AKG. That's what it says right there on the
It
top.
it says K240. That's what it says.
Hey, we got a
It
good
was expensive too. I spent some money on this show. There's
got
no
a
doubt about it.
got a good update from David. It looks like he said his mom is doing better and wants to thank everyone for the prayers and well wishes. We are a super group of people, and all our support is appreciated. Well, we appreciate you, David.
I'll let you produce. We can either let you make this decision or make the audience. This is what we can do. We can go in to a modern wrestling talk. We can talk about AEW Grand Slam, and we can talk about SmackDown this past week, or we can jump right in to the 70s, which we have backup for that, absolutely, with graphics and pictures and that sort of thing. Say hello to Mike. Says, hey, fellas. Well, hey, fella, what's going on with you? So what do you want to do here, Adam? Usually you need to take advantage of this because usually I do what I want when I want, right?
Yeah, you do.
And I don't like people telling me what to do, but I'll let you tell me what to do.
Or what kind of microphone to get. No.
Oh yeah, any production thing, I'll let you talk about.
Okay.
Even though I knew the answer,
Right.
it went over my head. I do have a tabletop microphone, but that's not what he was talking about. I don't think so. Do you? What do you think he was thinking about?
He said tabletop, and I don't know if he meant maybe a headset mic or whatever. But uh, if we have plans on having Michael and everyone else on later, and we're going to talk all 70s, then we can go ahead and knock out the current wrestling now if you want to.
That's the problem. He said he would be here at 5 after, and I believe it's past 5 after.
Unless he meant 5 after the second hour.
No, he said 5 after 7. He said 5 after 7. And Pat didn't all the way commit. He said he'll try. So I know Chris isn't coming, but
yeah,
we'll go ahead and do that because last week at Arthur Ashe Stadium in Queens, New York, for the second year in a row, AEW ran Arthur Ashe. And I'm going to put my friend Adam, who's not into sports except for wrestling. Adam, do you know who Arthur Ashe is? Do you have a clue?
I want to say tennis, but I could be way
Yes,
the hell off.
I can't believe it.
One in a row. There we go.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Hey, I want to ask you a question. Albert Pujols with the St. Louis Cardinals just said a very important thing that had just been done by 3 other people. Do you know what record he just set this past Friday night in Los Angeles, California? I'm going to keep asking you trivia questions till you miss one.
I'm probably going to miss this one, but if it's baseball, I would say maybe something home run related or something, but I have no clue.
I need a name.
Oh, who it was that did it?
That hit 700 just Friday. Nobody stoops for Adam. Nobody answer that. Al, you're a troublemaker. Don't you dare. So you don't know, is that correct?
Well, you just said that Albert Pujols did it, right?
Oh, I stooped on myself.
Right. So I'm like, who is it besides that?
Now, had you ever heard of Albert?
No, I have. Just because there was that tie-in with them into the Redbirds and all that, because isn't the Redbirds a feeder team for the Cardinals?
Yes, and where are the Redbirds?
Memphis,
Tennessee, Union Avenue, in good old Memphis, Tennessee. You know that song, "Walking in Memphis." Do you like that song, Adam? "Walking in Memphis."
Yeah, is it Mark Cohn? Isn't that who does that?
Well, I tell you who does it better than him, my buddy Chris Gales. He was fantastic. He used to sing it all the time. He'd get mad at me because I'd call the shot. He gets tired of singing and I'd make him do it because the people would love that
Love
song.
it, yeah.
Especially in Memphis, Tennessee at 5190, 5190. I'm giving Lawler's the 159 bill. I gave Lawler's old address by mistake. 5190 Warner Grove Road.
Yeah,
he does not live there anymore, people.
Don't show up.
Don't show up.
Did we piss off Al? What's Al looks like he has an angry face there.
Al, what did you get mad at? What that I told you not to stooge that off?
Yeah,
Are you giving?
That might be that his mouth is zippered where he can't talk or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thought maybe he was either frowning at you because we made it public in front of the world that you don't know anything or much about sports, even though I cannot believe. How did you know the Arthur Ashe deal? How did you know that?
Well, I did do a little bit of back in my Time Warner days when we did the high school football. Remember we talked about Bud did some of those with us. We also did the Kroger St. Jude tennis tournament at the Racket Club in Memphis. So
Okay. All
knew
right.
a little bit of it from that. Which I don't think the
Now,
Racket Club in Memphis is even still open anymore.
I don't think it is either. And Al said you got it right. He was
Right
zipping
on.
up. So he zipped up, he zipped up. He takes instructions. Now,
Well,
Jeff Frog Wheeler
he
back
was
from
burning
Facebook.
chicken on the grill.
Do what now?
I said he was burning his chicken on the grill, so I guess we'll let him be late.
All right. Who was?
Jeff
Jeff Frog
Frog
Wheeler,
Wheeler.
who's out of Facebook jail
Yeah.
and he's burning chicken. I cannot believe he burned a chicken. I don't like chicken in the first place. But back to Arthur Ashe Stadium. Back to last Wednesday and last Friday because they did 2 days there, but they really didn't. They showed it 2 days, but they were live for Dynamite, then they recorded, and they didn't get out of there till 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, can you imagine going to the Mid-South Coliseum and the show started at 7:30, and heck, Dynamite started at 7 o'clock, and they do a couple hours of dark and so it was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Is that not ridiculous? That's giving
No.
the people their money's worth, but I wouldn't want to see that much wrestling.
Any type of live event, if it goes over 3 hours, I'm done.
Now, David says, I'm watching The Expendables 2 and listening to the program all at once. He's just multitasking. Well, I'll tell you, I'll get to it. I've been stretching it out. I'm just rambling on. This is called a stretch in television, and then the rib on us will be if Michael doesn't show up at all, and if Pat don't show up at all, and I'm spending 30 minutes just talking about things that most of my audience and myself and Adam, none of us want to talk about, but I think that I can make it interesting. As Tanner says.
Tanner, please delete your comment. Randy, don't read that.
Do you really not want me to read it?
I don't want you to read it, no.
Okay. Well, will you read Frank's? If I read Frank's, I'll have to read Tanner. You know, I have no choice but see Tanner. So can you tell me, Frank never says something stupid or something that would insult me. Can you read that to me?
Yeah. Frank says, hey, guys, Randy, do you know they are honoring the 1972 state championship game, which went into 3 overtimes? He'll be there Friday night. So I'm sure he's talking about the 72 Jonesboro, right?
Yes, Jonesboro High School, state champions. And I don't know if I'm going to stay at home to stay at home. I don't know if I'm going to Forest City to see my senior nephew. He's not the oldest one. He's a senior in high school at Valley View. I watched his homecoming game against Paragould this past Friday because I'm a little normal, Adam. I do watch sports. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know at all because I may go to Forest City to watch Cal play, or I may go to Jonesboro High School to see Frank and to see the guys that was played before, they were in school before me. I may do that. I just don't know. So what's he saying now, Adam?
He's saying that we played the game the day after Thanksgiving, and they called the game at 11:30 that night.
So it was a draw. It went Broadway. It went through in wrestling lingo. Did it go to a draw?
I guess,
he needs to answer.
Or maybe he's saying the game lasted until 11:30 because of the 3 overtimes.
Well, they might have had 3 overtimes and then no victor.
Oh, yeah.
Did it go to a draw? Frank, you can't tell me this stuff and then not give me an answer of what's going on.
The great Muta moment saving Sting was pretty cool, Al Tuttle said.
Absolutely. There is no doubt about that.
It was a draw, 14-14.
14-14, 1973. If I'm in town, I'll go to Main Street, Jonesboro, Arkansas. I will go to Jonesboro High School. I will go to that stadium. I will make an appearance. Now, let me throw this in, and Michael will be in just a minute because he is on the air. He's on the air and he'll talk, but I'm just fired up talking about nonsense. I had a Uber ride this morning. So the young man graduated 2020, just 2 years ago. We were going to a factory at 4:45 in the morning. And so we were talking about school. And he said he graduated 2020. I said, I graduated 42 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And he asked me the craziest question. And he said, who was the most famous person in your class? And it's all relative. It's all relative. There's no doubt about it. But the thing that came in my mind, I was thinking this person, that person, and I was thinking my background. I mean, I don't know how many of them had airtime and produced and wrote and directed and was the boss of one of the most iconic television programs in the history of the market. That puts me up there. Do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Hometown guy, being on television
Right.
for 30 years, that puts me up there. Being somebody that's on the local radio every week puts me up there. Somebody that's written a book, somebody that knows The Rock and knows different mainstream celebrities. So as I'm thinking, not to knock anybody else, and I certainly was not popular in high school, but if you say right now, who's the most famous in that class? I think you have to say me, Adam. Is that me just being cocky?
No, I think you're right. And Tanner said someone can easily Google or YouTube you and find multiple videos of you. So yeah, you would be the famous one.
All right, I appreciate it. I like Tanner, so we can let Tanner go for the comment that you didn't want me to read. Now, I want to put this first guest, which will probably be our only guest, unless Pat gets here somehow or another. Now, I want him to, before we bring him on the screen, I'm going to give him a warning.
Okay.
Warning. This is a production meeting, a production talk, a talk to Michael St. John on how I want him to come into this show. Boy, Florida is in trouble. The Southeast is in trouble. It is in trouble. Hurricane Ida or Louise or what tornado's coming, Adam? You know?
It's my son's name. It's Ian. How the hell did you not know that?
It's Ian. There's Hurricane Ian coming. So the chief broadcaster, the guy that's made his living and broadcasted only his whole life, he is going to start this segment by telling you what the weather's going to do in Arab, Alabama, where he lives. He's going to tell you how in Mobile and Pensacola, that area of the Gulf Coast. Then he's going to tell you what's going to happen in Tampa and in Miami and in all over those places. So I don't want you to come in as a wrestling expert, and I'm going to go off the screen as soon as you come on the screen. Your weather report on how bad it's going to get and how scared you are. I want to know how scared you are. Ladies and gentlemen, Hall of Fame broadcaster, my friend, your friend, Adam's friend, Randy West's friend. Boy, I'm fired up today. Here's Michael St. John.
Hey, Randy, do I look like Dave Brown? I'm not a weather guy.
Well, be
That's what I was thinking.
Be Dave Brown today. You both have gray hair, so leave me the heck alone.
I love you, brother. Oh, we've been keeping up with it all day at a meeting with the National Weather Service because our tower for Fun 92.7 and WRAB 107 FM has the transmitter tower or the transmitter antenna for the National Weather Service all over North Alabama. We cover 8 counties and their weather covers 8 counties. So I get some good inside information. What they're saying in this part of Alabama is a heck of a lot different than what they're saying down in South Alabama. They're expecting it to be a category 2, 2.5 by the time it hits landfall. They say now they keep looking at the models and the wind speed. This is a slow mover. And so they're saying that this is going to hit just north of Tampa Bay and sometimes probably late tomorrow night, Thursday morning. And then it's going to travel right through Gainesville and right on up to Jacksonville and then back into the Atlantic, where they say it may reform. But they're saying now it's a 4 now, but it's a week 4. It's going to be a 3 by the time it hits around Sarasota or so, and maybe into Tampa, a week 3, week as in WEAK, 3 to hurricane. But what we're worried about down on the Panhandle, and my sister lives in Panama City Beach, and they are in Gatlinburg for the rest of the week, thank God. But they're worried about the whip. The whip, the way that turns, that whip of that storm brings that ocean surge and brings the storms and brings the rain and brings the tornadoes and all that. So everybody from about Pascagoula, Mississippi, all the way to the hook of Florida are under a watch for that. The more so on the Gulf Coast side of Florida and Alabama, looking for flooding and maybe some pop-up tornadoes. But for us in North Alabama, there's going to be heavy rain about as far as Dothan, maybe a little bit towards Troy and Montgomery. But north of that, we're going to get some rain showers, maybe some thunder showers, and a little bit of nothing after that on Friday. And then the weekend's looking really good for just about everybody. So that's my best Dave Brown I can do, Randy. I hope it worked.
How do you think Pat will be in Birmingham?
About the same as us, not a lot, not some rain showers, some thunder showers, but nothing critically severe and no flooding as anticipated.
We will just hop right into this. I forgot, Michael, you said you're going to be 5 after. I forgot. I took off early today to come home and cook. I forgot to the last minute, then Adam sent it to you. I forgot to send you a link to join the show.
I got it.
So maybe you were ready at 5 after 7 and you just didn't have that link. I don't know. Was that your issue or were you running late?
It was my issue, and that over the fact that we had a little issue with a hotspot for one of our broadcast units, and I had to make a run at 15 to 7 up to the local cricket store and make sure that they had the credit card number right. And they did, and we got all that straightened out. But I was around about 7 after, 8 after, so I think I'm okay. But when I got the link, that was right away. The one thing, too, about the link, and Adam, you may want to make a note of this, if you click the link off your email, it sends me and just spins and spins and spins. So what I had to do is I had to copy the link, go back out, and then open a browser and in fact, this is a browser for, I think I am on, what browser am I on? I'm on Google. I'm on the Google browser, Chrome, so it's coming in fine. But anyway, just that. Randy, you had a great thing when I was listening coming in, talking about the most famous people in your class. In my high school class, I'd have to be considered. I'll be honest with you. I'm the only one in my whole class that's in the Hall of Fame. Now, there's some other people who have done great things. That's yes. But I'm in the Memphis. I'm in the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame, which I'm proud of. I'm in the NWA Wrestle Birmingham Hall of Fame, which I'm proud of. And I'm proud, of course, of being in the Alabama Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. But I will tell you, in college, the person that I think is the most famous out of my class in college is Skip Bayless, who does that Skip and Shannon show on ESPN.
Yeah.
Skip ran the Vanderbilt newspaper, The Hustler, while I was running WRVU, the Vanderbilt radio station. So
man.
Skip is, of course, on national TV. He's been a sports writer of the year for the San Jose Mercury News and the Dallas Morning News. And Skip's a great guy, and I know him quite well. And I would have to say unless somebody else out there has escaped me, in my class at Vanderbilt, I would say Skip Bayless is certainly the most impressive of people that I would say are the most famous.
Adam will help me out here before we talk about wrestling, before we talk about the era that made me a wrestling fan and got me in the business. And I'm still fired up and as excited today than I was the first time I watched Channel 13 Wrestling. But I want to talk about the decade of the 70s. And we have that graphic up there. And I'm just going to throw stuff at you. And then Michael will have his comment. In the 70s, our presidents of this country in the 70s, Richard Nixon, then Gerald Ford, then Jimmy Carter. Movie stars, we had Robert Redford, we had Burt Reynolds, and we had Smokey and the Bandit. We had Harrison Ford, we had Gene Hackman, we had Clint Eastwood, Diane Keaton, Faye Dunaway. Television shows besides Channel 13 Wrestling and TV5 Wrestling. we had All in the Family, we had MASH, we had The Jefferson, we had Dallas, we had The Odd Couple, Three's Company, Happy Days, The Jeffersons, Laverne and Shirley, Little House on the Prairie, Good Times, Carol Burnett, Mary Tyler Moore, and the Waltons. Rock and roll of the 70s, man. The band, we had Led Zeppelin, we had Pink Floyd, we had the Rolling Stones, we had Black Sabbath, we had the Who, we had the Eagles, we had all kinds of stuff. Boxers, we had Ali, we had Foreman, we had Frazier. There was all kinds of stuff going on. There's no doubt. A stamp in the year 1970 was 6 cents. 6 cents, 6 cents, 6 cents. My gosh, what in the world happened? Of 1970, the Super Bowl champions were the Kansas City Chiefs. And in the World Series, it was Baltimore defeating the Bengals. In the NBA, the champion was the Knicks. Also in 1970, the Beatles broke up. Monday Night Football debuted with Howard Cosell, Frank Gifford, and Don Meredith. Man, all kinds of things going on. Also, there was 4 students killed in Kent State by the National Guard. Famous deaths included Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, of course, in 1977 in August, Elvis, that affect this area more than anybody else, and Leonard Skinner. Also, in 1979 and age 72, John Wayne passed away. What did I leave out, Michael? Your thoughts of what I just talked about right now. Everybody fired up. Let's go back to the 70s. Talk about your favorite TV shows, your favorite movies, your favorite music. You're a radio guy, your favorite music. Lay it on me. How old were you in 1970?
I got married my first wife in 1975. And in January of that year, and my son was born in 1975 in December of that year. So the 70s was an incredible year. I graduated college in 73. It was a decade that it really, when you look back historically at the 70s, it was a decade of change. In far as the first part of the 70s was a whole lot different than the last part of the 70s. And leaving politics out of the equation, you started out the 70s with the birth of hard rock, with the birth of what they called album rock or hard rock. And you had groups like like Cream that had been in the very late 60s, and Led Zeppelin and Blind Faith and those kind of bands. Grateful Dead was huge in the 70s. So you had that on the music side in the early 70s. In the late 70s, it got to be disco. Yeah, the disco revolution, Studio 54, it started in 1977. And you had the Bee Gees that just went from being a British band, British invasion band of the 60s to being the disco band of the 70s. So, you had a lot of change as far as culture. You had a lot of change in the way of thinking. We went from being in a very unpopular war in Vietnam. You mentioned the Kent State killings. And 4 Dead in Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, to the end of the decade. It was Night Fever by the Bee Gees. So a lot going on. My favorite movies out of the 70s, without a doubt, were The Godfathers. Was The Godfather 1, Godfather 2, and Jaws. And those were, those are pop movies. I mean, there's not a lot of, they were great movies back then. My favorite wrestler out of the 70s, still had to be the fabulous Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto. They were still stars. They were still active. They could still work. They began training other stars. I mean, look at Jerry Lawler, trained by Jackie Fargo. Tojo Yamamoto began training people from Bobby Eaton right on down to some of the bigger stars of the 80s. So it was really a growth period of the 70s. So was it my favorite decade? No, but it was probably pretty close.
Now, Frank Seaton's saying the movie The Sting. I've never watched that movie. Michael, can you give us a little scoop on the movie The Sting?
Yeah, it was with Robert Redford. I think he won an Academy Award for it. The music by Marvin Hamlish with the piano. Dun, 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 dun. But it was a movie about a guy that was, if I remember, was a gambler or a pool player. And, it was a pretty good movie without giving it away. I don't remember that movie. I saw it one time. And I do not have it on DVD, so I remember more the music and who starred in it than I do the actual movie. Now, The Godfather, hey, the only time, I think I may have said this before on the radio or on TV. I know I've said it on the radio, but I think the only time I may not have said it on this podcast. My grandfather and I were very close. My grandfather immigrated from Sicily in 1913 to ending up in Huntsville, Alabama. And I grew up in my grandfather's house with my mom and dad taking care of him. And I was his favorite, just like, gosh, I hope I'm Joshua's favorite. My only time, Randy, the only time my grandfather ever hit me, ever touched me, we were at the dinner table. I always sat to his right. We had 6 places at the dinner table. I was to the right of my grandfather. My mother was here. My dad was on the other end. My Uncle Sam was across the way. My Uncle John, who was a big wrestling fan, got me turned on to wrestling. Well, my godfather was across the street. And they were talking about the mafia. And I made the smart-ass comment that, boy, I wish I could join the mafia. And before I knew it, I had that backhand right across the kisser, right across the face. But he whacked me hard. But I never said that again. But that was about the time the Godfather movie came out, and I remember that very distinctly. But the 70s was an interesting time for wrestling when you think about it, too, because just like we had a change in the guard, if you would, of everything from music to movies to the culture in this country, we also had a change in professional wrestling. From wrestling had TV, it had stories, it was still a mainstay, but then you got more into the flamboyance of wrestling. And toward the end of the 70s, you had wrestlers coming on with videos and entry music and flamboyant outfits, whereas before that was reserved for Gorgeous George and some of the more flamboyant people in the business. But wrestling went from being a staid, tried and true, get that hammerlock or get that headlock or get them down on the mat and push it in and pull it on for 60 minutes to be more action, more excitement, crazy things happening for finishes. And I think that was really tantamount for how Memphis wrestling played a part in that.
Now, you will be able to answer this better than me because you watched Memphis wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as much as you watched Nashville or Birmingham wrestling, but I saw a different show than you did as you saw the show there. How much different, because you certainly know Jerry Jarrett's style and that style of wrestling. How much different was the Jerry Jarrett book show than, Nick didn't book for himself, but whether he had Lynn Rossi or Tom Ernesto or whoever it was, I'm sure Tojo had some input. How different were those two ends of the territory?
I think the thing that Jerry did is that he was more unpredictable as to, you were liable to see any and everything on Memphis wrestling, even in the 70s. It was getting to the point where the shock value of what was happening was always a possibility. Whereas with Nick's show, I think everything was laid out and everything went to plan. And I think Nick was more of a taskmaster before that. Jerry, I think, was more of a writer, creative person. Therefore, his creativity spilled over into the TV show. And that was the thing when I'd watch Nick's TV and watch a Channel 13 tape, 13 would always have more action, more, excuse my French, but piss and vinegar to it. Whereas Nick had exciting action, but didn't have as much of it. And you would see everything stay more, at least to a viewer, it was more stayed to plan. with a Nick Gulas TV show than with a Jerry Jarrett show where everything could go out the window in the first 5 minutes.
Now, I have a question for you, and try to be as honest as you can, because you don't have a dog in the hunt, because you made it clear a few weeks ago you wouldn't pick between, as human beings, between Jerry Jarrett and Nick Gulas. Both of them was very good. I'm not asking you that at all. I'm asking you, did you like that? And as a kid, you would watch the main TV show you watched in Alabama was from what city?
Well,
Birmingham?
again, in Huntsville, we had 5 wrestling shows on a Saturday. I've talked about it a lot. But the show that I would gravitate to the most would be the Nashville TV, only because it aired, I want to say at that time, they'd moved it from channel 8 to channel 2. And at that time, it went from a 10:30 kickoff or a 10:30 showtime at night from 10:30 to midnight. It went to a 11 o'clock in the morning show. And it would sort of be a precursor of what you were going to see at 4 o'clock in the afternoon from Chattanooga and Channel 12 and Harry Thornton, what you were going to see at 5 o'clock in the afternoon from Grady Reeves on Channel 19. We wouldn't get a lot of those same stars, but we get two matches on TV, and both were 2 out of 3 falls. And the first one would normally be a singles match, and second one would normally be a tag team. And then that night at Channel 42 in Birmingham, you would see a lot of what happened in either Memphis in Nashville or Chattanooga on TV in Birmingham the same time. So without being smart to the business, I was sort of smart to the business, if that makes sense. But as my favorite, my go-to was the Nashville show.
You would say out of all of them, the Birmingham show, the Nashville show, the Memphis show, you thought the best show was the Nashville show? Do I understand that?
Absolutely. Right. And it was the first one in the morning. And I don't know if the boys were fresh or it was just a better show. It was produced at Channel 2, which was an ABC and still, an ABC still is an ABC affiliate in Nashville. And I thought it was the best production of the show. I also liked the announcers. The announcers were Smiling Jack Simpson and Gil Green. And Gil Green was the guy in the ring that would do the announcements and do some of the live advertisements with Harold Shire, Shire's Jewelers on 4th Street in Nashville. And he would do all that. And then Smiling Jack Simpson was the play-by-play guy, and he never smiled, which is why they called him Smiling Jack Simpson. But Jack Simpson was sort of like a precursor to a Lance Russell, but very staid and true to, the wrestling holes and what you were seeing and an explanation without going over the top. And so that was my favorite show. It's funny. It's ironic you bring this up, though, Randy. Friday mornings, we do a show on the radio on 3 of our stations down here called Coach's Breakfast. And we had a special guest that my colleague, Ronnie Shoemate, our county commissioner, brought in. He brought Robert Reeves to Coach's Breakfast the other day. That's Grady Reeves' son. And I've known Robert since I was a kid, and we had a great time with him. And we got to reminiscing on the air about the wrestling shows. And he always used to say that his dad, that the boys would always do something that his dad wasn't expecting. And Grady would just get riled up. He'd get PO'd. And he recalled a couple of things. And it was really funny hearing those stories from, and he was, most of the time, he was at Channel 19 in a chair right there in the second row to the left of the announce desk. So he saw it and heard it all. But he said that Tojo and Jackie Fargo were huge ribbers of his dad. And they'd go over things in the back, and then Tojo would come out there and just take a left-hand turn and go off into the tangent, or Jackie would do something crazy. And he said it would always hack his daddy off because he was a TV celebrity, a sports director, and all here in the city in Huntsville. And he'll always like things to go as planned. And if Fargo or Tojo was on the show, sooner or later he was going to get upset about something because they would go off script. But I thought that was a funny insight on that.
We're going to deep dive into this. If this takes for the rest of the show, if this takes for the rest of the month, if it takes for 2 months, we're going to cover the 70s in a deep dive way, the best the 70s ever been covered. I've said before, I did a preview earlier. I did the opening earlier. I will say it in again. My life would totally be absolutely different if not for that day in 1971 that I found Memphis wrestling. The whole story. I wouldn't be me. I would be a different, who in the hell knows what I would be. But the 70s, that first Saturday morning on Channel 13, I sang once, I'm going to sing again that jingle. And then Michael is going to give you a history of jingles on television back in the day and when the heck they went away. But when you turned on Channel 13 at 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings, you got a jingle that said, "It's America's favorite sport on WHBQ television." And they went right into Lance and Dave during the open. And man, that caught me and made me a lover of wrestling for life. And before I go on with as passionate I'm going right now, I want to teach on this program not only about wrestling, about television, about broadcasting, how it's evolved over the years. Jingles. When did you first hear the jingles? When did it come about? And when did it go away?
Well, radio was the jingle came about in the mid 50s when Top 40 radio came about. And before that, there were station identifications sung by in-studio bands or quartets or groups or whatever. And you can go back as far, I know WLW in Cincinnati had one of the first television jingles on the air back in the 38, 39 with their noon show. A lot of the live shows on TV in the early days of TV in the 50s and into the 60s somewhat. At Channel 4 in Nashville, it went on, and with the noon show up until the mid 80s, they would have live bands or combos play, and they would most of the time have singers or a lead singer. And that's how the quote unquote jingle identification came about. And in reality, what happened was a lot of the TV stations couldn't afford to pay a live band or to put on a show of that magnitude. So there was several jingle companies. One of the biggest in Memphis, Tennessee was Pepper Tanner, and it was founded by Bill Tanner, who also was involved in some way. His family was involved with the introduction of Holiday Inn into the culture of America. And Bill Tanner Productions was around. It was Pepper Tanner, and then it became Bill Tanner Productions for a long time. And a lot of what you heard, in fact, the jingle you heard on Channel 19 was produced right there at Pepper Tanner, right there in Memphis. And in fact, I can picture their studio, and I'm trying to think of the name of the street it was on. It wasn't Poplar. It's the street where when I-40 would come into Memphis, you'd either get off on the Beltway on 240, or you would go straight and it would dead end into that street. And it wasn't Central Avenue. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Sam Cooper?
No, well, it may be Sam Cooper now, but it was something. It was a one name, and after you get off, that your first or second intersection was Parkway, but it went east-west. And it was Poplar, and then I'm trying to think of that street, and then you went further north. I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, that's where their studios were. And they had quite a few really talented singers of course, Memphis was a musical, had a lot of music talent in it then and has today. So, but the other big jingle company in America was out of Dallas, and it was called PAMS, Production, Advertising, Marketing, and I forget what the S was, but anyway, PAMS of Dallas. And that was the one like at Channel 31 here in Huntsville, Way TV, Colorful Way TV, Channel Wonderful, Wonderful. It was all those little 5 second, 4 second jingles came out of Dallas. So that's, where they came. But the idea was the jingle was an offshoot of the studio bands and studio musicians in the studio for a live show. And then after that, they, recorded them to audio tape, and they were included in part of the programming in TV. Radio, we have had jingles since the 50s, and we still, depending on what the format is and who's programming it, you may use a lot of them. You may use not very many of them. Some people use none. I think they're very helpful because just like you sang the Channel 13 jingle just now, the one thing that will keep in a person's mind is a little, a catchy little phrase. The Oscar Mayer Wiener song can still be a lot. I heard something not too long ago that more people knew the words to the Oscar Mayer Wiener song than knew the words to the national anthem. And so that tells you something about jingles.
I don't know what in the world is going on here. There's just all of a sudden a video appeared on my preview screen. I don't know what in the world that is.
I think Adam's working behind the scenes, brother.
Or maybe we have another guest and did you hear that, Michael?
Yeah, I don't recognize it, but I hear it.
You're going to have to smart us up on what's going on, Adam.
I was just uploading the little WMC legal ID.
Yeah.
Why don't
YouTube
you play
is
that?
full
Can
of
you
this.
play that? Put that on the screen.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Folks, this is a live program that changes as it goes, and Adam Dunn is doing his magic now, and as soon as he gets it, he'll put it on the air. This is fun. Here we go. How many times have you seen that, Michael St. John?
A bunch. Having programmed and lived in Memphis, that was iconic. That was Memphis. That was the best ID of any TV station in Memphis.
Getting back to the wrestling, and I want to say this, and we'll go slow on this, Adam, and we'll back it up with the graphics, and we'll basically show in this segment of the 70s my life that started as a fan and a fan for a long time, and as a kid became into adult and into the business. But my first favorite wrestler that hooked me, I've said many times, Al Green and Jackie Fargo hooked me in the hair match. But as we go graphic with the fabulous one himself from Memphis, Tennessee, Jackie Fargo. Jackie Fargo, in the first picture we see right here, and Jackie lived to 2013, died at age 82 years old. And a picture that I really thought that Michael would enjoy, of course, that picture, classic Jackie Fargo, and the other picture that we recently uploaded, the fabulous Jackie Fargo and Nick Goulas. This is Jackie, older than the first picture we've seen, but the fabulous Jackie Fargo. Now, in the history of Memphis wrestling, the first two big stars, I would say, would be Billy Wicks and Sputnik Monroe. Of my lifetime, because I didn't watch wrestling in the 50s, hadn't seen them in the prime at all. I just know what I've heard, and I know the money they drew. I love that picture of Nick Goulas, who I never met. I love that picture of Jackie Fargo. And that first picture we saw of Jackie Fargo, if we can switch back, when as a 10-year-old kid in Jonesboro, Arkansas, Michael, I used to sell that picture, that 8x10, for 50 cents. It cost the fans 50 cents for that picture. I got 10%, which was 5 cents. I made 5 cents for every picture I did. The man that certainly hooked me in professional wrestling was Jackie Fargo and his feud with Dunn and Al Green. And we'll go ahead and find that picture of Dunn and Al Green up there right now. Dunn and Al. Don Green died in 2014. Al Green died shortly, either before or after, and their manager was Sir Steve Clements. So there's that picture. So that's quite a lot to steal from your buddy Conrad. He says there's a lot to unpack here. Well, Michael St. John, I want you to unpack, and I want to throw two more in the pack that I think all these guys go together. The picture of Jackie Fargo, the picture of Don Green, Al Green, and Steve Clements. Also, the picture of the Honorable and Imperial Tojo Yamamoto with his first protege, Jerry Jarrett, who would later become promoter Jerry Jarrett of Jarrett Promotion. There is a very young Jerry Jarrett, a younger Tojo Yamamoto than most of us grow up in. So there's that great picture of Tojo and Jerry Jarrett, the picture of Don and Al Green, the picture of Nick Goulas, and the fabulous Jackie Fargo, and that classic shot of Jackie Fargo. So, Michael, I'm turning it back over to you. And just there's a huge list here, so take that in consideration. But smarten people up on who we were just taking a look at to get this segment started.
Well, from the top is Fargo. Jackie Fargo was a tremendous wrestler. He was a very big star in other parts of the country until he came to Nashville and came to Memphis in the Southeast. And he fell in love with it. He fell in love with the people. He fell in love with the towns. He fell in love with the arenas. And he loved the style of wrestling that he was allowed to do. You know, the fabulous Fargos, he and Don Fargo were the first tag team to headline a main event in New York's Madison Square Garden for a sellout.
Say that again. That's so impactful. Say that one more time.
Okay, Jackie and Don Fargo were the first tag team to be in the main event of a wrestling show at Madison Square Garden that the garden sold out for. It was a sellout. He and Don Fargo were wrestling, and I forget who they were wrestling at the time, but it was in the late 50s, and the Fargos were in the New England territory, and they were the first tag team to sell out Madison Square Garden in the main event. And then he and Don came south, and then Don went off and on his own and went out west, and Jackie went out west for a short period of time in the Los Angeles and Portland areas, San Francisco, and came back very quickly. And that's how he ended up in Nashville. And Nick hired him and Don, and then Don went back to LA, went back to the West Coast, and Jackie brought Sonny Fargo, better known to most of our viewers and listeners as Roughhouse Fargo. And I've told the story before, but I was in the locker room in Nashville in 1977, and Jackie had come in. In fact, the picture that you saw of him and Nick Goulas was taken that night. I have a very similar picture of Jackie and myself, that one. But he had that hairstyle. He had more of the bobby cut back then, and the flowing locks he had already gotten rid of. But he brought Roughhouse in. And they were sitting in the back and they were talking, and Jackie had his bottle of Crown out and offered me a drink, hey, pal, you want? No, I'm on the job, whatever. And he introduced me he said, you know, Roughhouse. I said, yeah. And I got to saying that, and I got to talking to him. I said, Jackie, when I was growing up and watching TV here in Nashville, you were teaming with your brother, Sonny Fargo. Whatever happened to Sonny Fargo? And Roughhouse starts laughing. And Jackie looks over and he said, doesn't he look like Sonny Fargo? And I went, no. And then sure enough, and then Jackie, the next week, he was in town for a couple of weeks, brought a picture that the one you've seen in there. They look like the New Year's Day babies, with this one strap leotard suit, and they had the top hats on, and they were sort of turned. And he said, look at this and look at my brother. Look at my brother. Look at this. And sure enough, you could see the resemblance of Sonny Fargo in that picture to Roughhouse. But I never put the two together until that moment.
Let's talk Jerry Jarrett, and let's show that picture again. Let's talk Jerry Jarrett and Tojo Yamamoto from the perspective of Michael St. John.
Well, Jerry Jarrett, I can remember when he debuted, he was undersized, and basically everybody beat the hell out of him. And one night, and I forget, I want to say it may have been Don and Al Green, but I may be wrong on this. In a match in Birmingham on Channel 42, because Sterling Brewer was doing the commentary, they tied up. Jerry Jarrett was teaming at the time with, gosh, I can't remember. And anyway, they got rid of the partner and they tied up Jerry Jarrett in the ropes and they started just beating him to a pulp. And out of nowhere came Tojo Yamamoto. And the people thought Tojo Yamamoto was going to get in the ring and start beating up Jerry Jarrett. And Jerry and Tojo just started going to town on the team that was taking advantage of Jerry Jarrett. And nobody had ever put together the fact that Jerry was being trained by Tojo. And they went on and they actually did a sort of a shoot interview. And I've been teaching him on the side. I teach him. Nobody take advantage of my man, my protege, Jerry Jarrett. And that's how Jerry got over in Birmingham. Now, it may have been a different turn in Nashville and then when they came to Memphis. But I can remember Jerry didn't weigh much more than I did, and he was in the wrestling ring. And I've also heard the story, and Randy, you may shed some light on this, that Miss Christine never wanted Jerry to be a wrestler.
No,
never wanted him in the ring.
absolutely.
She taught him the business side, but she did not want him to be a wrestler.
There's no doubt about it. And I want to put up the pictures together because there was different tiers, just like you see it in the WWE, you see it in AEW, you saw it in 80s Memphis wrestling. The tiers of this time in the 70s, and Adam, I want you to back me up and have all these pictures up there. There was 3 top baby faces in the territory full time in the early 70s, say 70, 71, 72, 73. And those 3 were Jackie Fargo, Jerry Jarrett, and Tojo Yamamoto. Sometimes you would see Fargo team with Jerry Jarrett, Fargo team with Tojo. You would see, different combinations of the team. So do you remember those days how the top tier of the babyface side was Tojo, Jerry Jarrett, and Fargo? Sometimes Fargo and Tojo were a tag team and they held the tag team championship. Jarrett and Fargo held the tag team championship. Certainly Tojo and Jerry Jarrett held the tag team championship many, many times. Quickly talk about that. Did you realize as a time as a young man, the top tier of the popular wrestlers, certainly we grew up in different areas, so it was different in your area maybe, but in the Memphis area, that was the top 3 baby faces, period. There was no doubt. The boys knew it, the fans knew it, everybody knew it. Was it like that in your area?
Well, first of all, the New Memphis promotion was an offshoot of the Nashville promotion, or part of the Nashville promotion under Nick Goulas and Roy Welch. I was actually in college during that period. I got to college in 69, 70, 71, 72, and 73. And I was right there in Nashville. I was there. I moved to Vanderbilt a month after the Hippodrome Arena on West End Avenue burned. And they built the Vanderbilt Holiday Inn, which still stands there today. I was watching Nashville TV on Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock from the studios of Channel 2 down on Murfreesboro Road, where Channel 2 is still located. So, yes, I do know, and this goes back just on a little history. I wasn't there to witness this per se, but I learned about this after getting into the business. When Lynn Rossi had his car wreck and he was unable to wrestle, well, he did try to come back, but he never was the wrestler he was. Lynn Rossi was Nick Goulas's top babyface for a long time. Even you got to realize Fargo came to the area as a tag team as a heel.
Right.
And Fargo didn't turn until, I think they told me that his first turn was in 66, late 66 or 67 to team babyface. And Jackie originally teamed with Lynn Rossi, but then they brought in Bearcat Brown, who was green at the time, and I forget where they found him. I want to say they found him in Louisiana or Mississippi or somewhere and trained him, and they teamed him with Lynn Rossi. So that was your big babyface team until Lynn Rossi's accident.
Now, there's the picture on the screen of Bearcat Brown and Lynn Rossi. So I'll look toward the screen, and you will see the big cat, Bearcat Brown, and Lynn Rossi, great competitors. Bearcat Brown, Matt Jewell was his name. Lynn Rossi lived to 91 years old, 2020. Bearcat Brown and Lynn Rossi, a great tag team.
You know, Randy West made a great comment, and I am aware. I know Tojo. They ran that thing on TV about Tojo. They did that angle on TV, but Jerry Jarrett was trained by Sailor Moran, and I did see Sailor wrestle. In fact, I got to know him. He was working or had his own used car lot in Lebanon, Tennessee, when Kicks 104 came on the air, and he was one of our advertisers. And I got to go meet him right after I'd started with Nick in 77. I went out, one of our sales guys said, "You got to meet this guy. He says he's a wrestler." So I went out with him, and that's who it was. It was Sailor Moran. And so
he trained Jerry Jarrett. He was a shooter. He was a bad son of a gun. I never met him. I never saw him wrestle. But again, the purpose of this program is kind of to brainwash the people, because most of the people, except for a few, didn't, because there's not a lot of video of that area. And old guys like Michael St. John and Randy Hales will know, Frank Seaton will know. A lot of people just can't comprehend how good wrestling was in this entire Tennessee area in the 1970s. We talked, and I'll skip around a little bit. I was going to do the Hills, but I'll go another in the Memphis area, another secondary team. I don't say that in a bad way. Jerry Jarrett felt that he needed a rest. Tojo and Fargo needed a rest. The Memphis was the tag team capital. You know, most main events until Jerry Lawler got hot in 1974, almost every main event was a tag team match. So the team that was normally in the semifinal match would, to give Tojo and Jarrett and Fargo a break, would be Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert. This is one of my favorite pictures of all time that was taken in Tupelo, Mississippi. Tommy Gilbert, Eddie Marlin with the fans, a great, great picture. So again, we drew, Michael might have seen them some, probably not as much as I saw them, but your thoughts on the tag team of Tommy Gilbert and Eddie Marlin back in that early 70s era, Michael?
Well, we did see him in Nashville, but not in a main event or a star or a main feature role. I saw Tommy as much as it's in singles matches as I did any other wrestler there, but he and Eddie would team. I got to know Eddie's brother before I got to meet Eddie. And in fact, he introduced Tommy Marlin, introduced me to his brother. And then I know you were very close with Eddie, and he was one of my favorites that I've ever worked with. I loved Eddie Marlin because Eddie Marlin was a number one, a super nice guy. But Eddie Marlin was there to help you out if you got in a bind, if the TV was running over, if something had changed on the fly or whatever. He was always there to come out and help you and say, "Hey, Michael," he'd pull the headphone off and say, "Hey, Michael, we got so-and-so change, or this is going to be a 2 out of 3 instead of a 1-fall match, or this is going to go until we go off the air." You know, whatever they were doing in the back before the director up in the booth would tell me in the IFB, Eddie would come out and say, and pretty much warn me what was going on. So not only was he a great wrestler, he was a great guy at putting things together and making them work. And I always, to this day, I respect him for, he was like a computer mind in wrestling before computers came out.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to do a little rant. I used to fuss at Michael because I don't like to compare another generation to our generation. I don't do a lot of anti-modern wrestling versus classic wrestling type of thing. I don't do that because I used to, I've said this story before, the older guys in the dressing room, like Buddy Wayne, just hated the Fabulous One, said to kill in the territory. And it wasn't just Buddy, just so many people was like that. And I didn't want to be that guy. But I will say this. The two things I miss the most about wrestling. Thing number one, and you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The business was more exciting and more fun and more enjoyable when there was a mystery to it. That's point number one. Point number two, and pretty much every promotion. It's not just AEW, and it's not just the WWE. It's everybody that you don't have strongly defined good guys, the baby faces in terminology, bad guys in terminology is heels. It's not defined anymore. The whole key drawing money is to get a baby face over, a good guy over. You had to have a hated, cheating, rugged, mean, but it didn't matter the style. You had to have that heel. The you had to have the deal, the good and the bad. You had to have that, and that's missing in this business. Now we talked about the baby faces. We talked Jackie Fargo, Jerry Jarrett, Tojo Yamamoto, Lynn Rossi, Bearcat Brown, Eddie Marlin, and Tommy Gilbert. We're talking early 70s. We were talking when tag teams in the Tennessee territory were normally the main events. And we're going to let Michael, and we're going to try to get these pictures all up at once, then have Michael discuss them. And don't have a lot of background information, and I will add one other team to this. We want to put Don and Al Green and manager Sir Steve Clemens up there. We want to then put up a picture of a team that scared me, the Big Interns. I think at the time that I started watching wrestling, Tom Andrews from Kansas City and Jim Starr were the interns. The manager was the diabolical and mean Dr. Ken Rainey. Another just hated teams that went all over the world and drew a lot of money and was in the first main event at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee, managed by gentlemen Saul Weingroff, Carl and Kurt von Bronner, the third team there. And there's gentleman Saul. There is Carl and Kurt von Bronner. And then in 1973, and let's look at those guys again. You see the Von Bronners right there.
Yep.
Then
Let me make a mention, if I will, Randy. Well, that's Saul, and then the guy to over his right shoulder, our guy to the left, is Kurt von Bronner, and Carl is a little bit smaller, the guy on the right, but Kurt was more of the bruising beast that would come in and just take no prisoners, whereas Carl von Bronner was more of a traditional catch as catch can, hold master and all that stuff. So you had a guy that was the whole master, and you had a guy that was the brute. Go ahead, Randy. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good. That's what I have you on here for, to add something about a team I never saw live in my life. Don't remember ever seeing it on TV, but I heard a lot about them. But I just want to make a point. You see those big Von Bronners. Then I want you to put, Adam, if you would, the picture of the interns. Look how big these guys are. You look at the Von Bronners, you see the interns with Dr. Ken Rainey. And then we'll go back to the original heel of my lifetime that I saw was Al Green, Al and Don Green, and Sir Steve Clemens, big guys. Now, I want you to show the picture from 1973. This was the heels beating the hell out of the baby faces, cheating, but beating the hell out of them, a huge size difference. But this came a team that was totally different than any team that had ever been in this territory and did box office. I can't speak again for Chattanooga, Birmingham, or Nashville, but by God, in Memphis, Tennessee, Louisville, Evansville, Lexington, Jonesboro, Tupelo, this Jackson, this whole territory, Jerry Lawler, Jim White, and Sam Bass was a top tag team, and they were absolutely sensational. And
hey, Randy, doesn't Jerry Lawler in that picture look like AJ Styles?
Yes, I've never noticed that before. Fantastic.
When I was working with Russell Birmingham and Linda Marks in Birmingham, AJ came down and Jerry was on the card. Linda brought Jerry in for a show, And AJ and Jerry were talking, and Jerry brought up that specific photo, and they laughed about it. But AJ Styles, very much, not quite as much now as he did 10 years ago, but AJ Styles very much looked like a young Jerry Lawler.
Great point that I didn't notice. And so the key then was the baby faces, Michael, whether it was Jared, Tojo, and Fargo, or Eddie Marlin and Tommy Gilbert, or whoever the case, they were used to the matches. They had sold, blew a comeback, and there you went home, and they just got beat up. Lawler and White and Bass would absolutely fly all over the place, bump like hell. Lawler back in the day, man, they talk about dangerous bumps that's taken today. Lawler would go up the top of the Louisville Garden and taking a bump all the way down. He was getting thrown over the bleacher railing onto the concrete floor. And there you see, as this territory transformed after in 1974, and I love that picture, the original of my lifetime Southern Heavyweight Championship, manager Sam Bass, who passed away in 1976. Sam passed away at July 76, 41 years old. Jim White lived to 2010, passed away at 67. Jerry Lawler is 73 years old. But the point I'm making about the transition, Michael, and was wondering if you saw the same transition on your end or not. The big, rugged, tough heels compared to Lawler and White, and I don't know how much you saw them as a team bump their ass off. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the first time I ever saw Jerry Lawler and Jim White was in Birmingham on Channel 42 at night, and they were over big. I mean, I think, and I remember Nick saying something about this, that Lawler was not as big in Memphis when he started out. He got over in Birmingham first. And then,
Really?
yes, and then he, as time progressed, he became a big star in his hometown. And that's, when you think about it, that's always the case. You're never a big star in your hometown unless you go away and do something and come back. And they want you. They can't miss you if you don't go away. So that appeals. That's appeals for radio DJs and television personalities and the like. But in wrestling, and I would agree with what Nick had said then, that Jerry was over and big. He and Jim White were huge in Birmingham. And in fact, one of their big rivalries when they first started showing them on Channel 42 Wrestling on Saturday night was against Bob Armstrong and, not Jimmy Golden.
Robert Fuller?
Beg pardon?
Robert Fuller?
I think it was Robert Fuller. I'm thinking it was either Robert Fuller or maybe Buddy Fuller even early on.
I think we may have a picture of Bob and Robert Fuller. If we can make a little magic, let's make
there
magic.
You go.
Bob
there you
Armstrong
go.
and Robert Fuller. How about that?
That's beautiful, and that's about that same era too. And look how young Robert was there. My gosh, and Bob too, for that matter. But they were just, and that program that they did in Memphis on Channel 42 was huge between those two teams.
One of the things, as Bob Armstrong also teamed in later years with Ron Fuller too, and they were a great team, and we may have the picture of Ron Fuller and Bob in later years that we could put up there. But one thing that, then there's Ron in later years, and toward the end of Bob Armstrong's life. One thing I knew is, as I did the research, and I have so many names here, and one tag team that I think is one of the greatest teams. And before we go off the air, maybe Adam will have a chance to get the picture Paul Wheeler mentioned, and what a team Phil Hickerson and Dennis Conry were. However, even though Phil was big and Dennis was a bigger guy, not as big as Phil, would absolutely 100%. Hey, Bobby Bunch, good to have you here. Dennis was big size guy, and Phil was big, about 280 pounds, but he would bump himself off. If we can find for later in the show a picture of Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey
Speaking of that,
together.
there's a side note on that. When
Okay.
when Jerry Jarrett took over the Memphis side of the territory and split from Nick, Condrey and Hickerson were working on the Nick side of the territory because they were working Nashville with us on TV on Wednesday nights and doing Nashville and Chattanooga and Huntsville and Birmingham. And then when Jerry took over and I believe I'm correct on this, that was when Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson split because Hickerson went with Jarrett and Condrey stayed behind with Nick Goulis. If I'm not mistaken, that's what I remember.
Well, also in 77, later in the summer, if he did do that, and I'm not sure because I didn't get Nick's TV, but later on in 77, pretty quickly, maybe June or July, Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey did team on the Jarrett end, and the manager of Hickerson and Condrey, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to hopefully Adam is looking for a picture of Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey. But at one point, when they first came in the territory, Sam Bass managed Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey. Can you manage? There's the picture of Phil Hickerson and Dennis Condrey. A great job from Adam Dunn, and I appreciate it. Adam, do you remember the Channel 5 days pretty quick after they switched to Channel 5? Do you remember who the manager was of Hickerson and Condrey?
Hold on. My cat just turned the board off.
Okay. We can still hear you.
Jimmy Hart?
No.
Or Jimmy Cornette?
No.
No. Well, you got
Want me to tell you?
Yes.
Rock Hunter.
Okay, yeah. He was with Atlanta. He was with Ann Gunkel's bunch in Atlanta and then came to Memphis.
He had a long run there. There's no doubt about it. We're going to move along because then Lawler was switched in 74. He had the road to the championship. He had the world championship matches with Jack Briscoe, with Harley Race, with Terry Funk, had some classic all-time matches. But in an era after July of 76, when Sam passed away, instead of bringing another manager in, they basically made Lawler the manager. And if you remember Lawler's Army that's the classic picture of Lawler, and had several people. The stooge of the group was Private Buddy Diamond. Now, this picture of Buddy Diamond right here was Lawler went out on TV and shaved his hair because a private can't have long hair, and did that deal. So that's a classic picture of Buddy Diamond. And other members of that group was Phil Hickerson, Dennis Condrey. Gorgeous George Jr. was a guy, and there's a classic picture of Gorgeous George. And we saw the video a couple of weeks ago when George turned on Lawler and turned on Pork Chop Cash. Dr. David Schultz was another guy. I think we might have a picture of Pork Chop Cash, but Dr. David Schultz, we don't have a picture of. He was a member of Lawler's Army. Another member of Lawler's Army, as we look at Pork Chop Cash there, was Dirty Dutch Mantell. So that's, as the Lawler's Army was a big force, as we see the Dirty Dutchman, Dutch Mantell. As we mentioned, 1976, I have to back up. In 1975, Lawler was fired by Jarrett, was banished from the territory, and all of a sudden, as the top heel Ron Fuller came in, They brought in the Mongolian Stomper in the territory as the top single thing. But the tag team that drew a lot of money was the debut of George Barnes and Bill Dundee in 1975. And we will show that picture, that classic picture of superstar Bill Dundee and George Barnes. George flat out got homesick and missed Australia. He went back home. Dundee stayed here. He was switched babyface against the interns. His partner at the beginning was Eddie Marlin. Bill came and saved Eddie Marlin. There's no doubt about it. Bill switched babyface. He was named the superstar and became Southern Tag Team Champions. And his tag team partner was Big Bad John. And we'll see a picture of the bicentennial baby, Big Bad John, a little article there. He would say, whoa, 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 what it is, baby, the bicentennial Big Bad John. He said, I'm the bicentennial baby, and this man from this point on is a superstar, Billy Dundee. And he named Bill Dundee the superstar. So a lot to unpack there. Lawler's Army, how much did you know about them? And also, of course, we'll talk Big Bad John, who is also a major heel on next end. Dundee and Barnes, Big Bad John, that same whole area. And how much this territory just flat out changed once Sam passed away in July of 76. So here to give me a little bit of a break with my throat and to drink some water is Hall of Fame radio member from the state of Alabama, Hometown, Alabama. Mine's not, his is, Michael St. John, unpacking some stuff on a Tuesday night talking Memphis wrestling.
Well, where we mentioned that Lynn Rossi's traffic accident, his car wreck really changed the course of wrestling in the Mid-South or the Southeast. The same happened with Sam Bass. And the Sam Bass thing was probably more impactful because they were really hitting on all cylinders at the time that Sam died. And Sam was one of those guys, Sam was the next door neighbor, that asshole next door neighbor that you hated. And he was a smart butt on TV. He was always a smart ass. And that was, and you listen to some of Jerry Lawler's heel interviews after he was associated with Sam, and he took on a lot of that Sam persona as a heel. And that was, the Sam Bass thing, the Lynn Rossi thing was incredibly bad, but the Sam Bass thing was worse because the territory was literally on fire, north to south, east to west, when that happened.
I want to clarify one thing real quick, then we'll get back to your train of thought. I'll just forget about it if I don't deal with it right now. Jeff Frog Wheeler says he thought Mickey Poole was the goof of Lawler's Army. No, it was Private Buddy Diamond. Now, in 1977, when Lawler had his program with Dundee and had to have a heel take the bumps and the heel lose the matches and the heel lose his hair and all the thing. You're right that Mickey Poole, Jeff, was Jerry Lawler's stooge and his goof. There's no doubt about it. However, that was after the Army days. Buddy Diamond was Private Buddy Diamond in Lawler's Army. And you see the picture of that. In later years, without the Lawler's Army, that was long gone. Mickey Poole was at ringside there. But we brought up Lawler and Barnes and Dundee. We brought up Sam leaving. That era around 1976 with Dundee and Barnes and Big Bad John speak. And I wish you would also speak to Big Bad John on the other end being a heel. And I wish you would speak to the inaugural appearance with Lawler banished with Barnes and Dundee top Hales tag team. Then they brought in Mongolian Stomper. They called him originally the Mongolian Stomper Tameljan. They later dropped that, but the original manager was Bearcat Wright, not Bearcat Brown, Bearcat Wright. We have so many more names to go, but that entire, I don't know if you have notes or not to remind you what we're talking about, but talk about those people and that era of the 70s.
Well, that was an interesting era of the 70s because you're coming out of Sam Bass's death and you get an influx of talent. You know, I want to step back, if I may, Randy, a couple of years prior to that, in fact, 4 years prior to that, because we didn't really hit on two of the major talents that Nick brought into the territory. Both were very, very young. I want to say 20, 21, maybe 22 years old, in Randy Savage and Dutch Mantell. And they had a run throughout the territory, Memphis, Louisville, Birmingham, Nashville, Chattanooga, all the towns, with one-on-one matches with Dutch Mantell and Randy Savage. And they would start out as a wrestling match. The program started out where you have two young, scientific, athletic amateur wrestlers that have gotten into professional wrestling. And it morphed into, every time they get in a ring, it was a barroom brawl. It was a fight. It was a street fight. It was tear your clothes off, go crazy, and unbelievable. But there was big money drawn all over the territory with that. Then, as you said, Big Bad John came over to the Nashville side as a heel. And, back then there wasn't a lot of people that saw Memphis wrestling in Nashville that knew of his demeanor there versus what he was in Nashville. So the business was kept more pure, if you would. And so he came in and he was just as good as a heel as he was a babyface, if not better. And I think there was and I may be wrong on this, but I believe that the rub came and Big Bad John left the territory, left the area over a payday situation with Nick. And after that, I don't know, where he went or what he did during that period.
He went to California and ended up somebody getting into his motel room and blew his brains out. He died. He was murdered in a motel room in California.
Wow. So much tragedy in the 70s, eh?
Yeah, it was certainly rumored to be, Michael, a murder and some kind of drug-related thing, and very, very, very sad. And I 100% agree with you. We had put up earlier the picture of Dutch Mantell because of the fact that they did not do Dutch Mantell as the picture of Dutch right there. Dutch entered this territory as a heel in the late 70s, was switched babyface in the 80s, and certainly a big part of the thing. I did not see Randy Savage until 1983 when he came into the Jarrett Inn, and Nick went away in 1980. So in the late 70s is when that great feud that I heard a lot about that I just didn't see. So that's another reason, besides being a Hall of Famer and besides the broadcasting background, you and Pat both have. That's why this show works. As far as I'm honed in to Memphis, plus I'm honed in to the inside. I've written the TVs, I've booked the TVs, I've given the finishes, all that sort of thing. But what I haven't done is I've hardly ever watched the national TV, don't know nothing about what went on there. So that's the perspective that Pat adds. You add that perspective too. Plus you have the broadcasting perspective that I've done somewhat, but not at the level of what you've done. So we all have different perspectives. And then with Adam, certainly a unique focus on TV production perspective with a love of Memphis wrestling. And I love Adam because his favorite wrestling is when he grew up, just like I grew up in 70s Memphis wrestling. That's my favorite. He grew up in late 98 Power Pro Wrestling. That's his favorite wrestling. You can't tell Adam Dunn that the best wrestling company he's ever seen. I don't care who you are. you're not going to tell that to Adam Dunn and get him to believe you. And you're not going to tell anybody to me that I booked the daggum stuff. But I'm not going to say it's the best wrestling I've ever seen. I'll say early 70s. It's what you grew up on. But still, just a little tangent of I think the different perspectives, Michael, of this show from a panel and host standpoint makes this show unique. And we're not afraid to argue with each other. We do it respectfully, but we're not afraid to have different opinions. And I think that's very important.
Well, there was also a babyface team that came in to play in the 70s and actually started out in Memphis, and they worked Memphis, Birmingham, which was a little different, and didn't work a lot in Nashville, were Ricky and Robert Gibson. And Ricky Gibson, to me, was I can remember seeing Ricky Gibson for the first time, and he reminded me a lot of a young Lynn Rossi. He reminded me of somebody he could work. He was just a good worker. And Robert was sort of lanky and skinny, and maybe he's not as coordinated as Ricky were, but they were a great team. But then as Ricky went off and got into Pensacola and Mobile and did a lot of work in Southeastern, then Robert stayed more so in this territory. And I believe it was either Jerry or Nick, I'm not sure of which one, put him and Ricky Morton together. And then, boy, that was magic after that.
Jerry
Lawler. Yeah,
yes.
that was magic after that.
And that's the young Rick Morton and Robert Gibson, the very first of the, and we'll just go ahead and do the background. This is probably 1983, Lawler booking, and he wanted a secondary tag team. They had the Kick-Ass Fabulous one, and somebody the older ladies loved and wanted to come see, and wanted a teeny bopper type of tag team. And there's Rick and Robert Gibson. Let me do a little deal on Rick Gibson, and let's put the picture off, and then I want Michael to elaborate on this. Ricky Gibson drew a lot of money here. 1974, people, was one of the biggest attendance year. Now, in later years, Michael, they raised the prices and they did more money. The best year of attendance ever at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee was in the summer of 1974. They did like 7 or 8 straight, 11,700 or plus when the fire marshal wasn't there. They added some in there. They cheated a little bit. But in that 7 or 8 sellouts, it was either Jerry Lawler against Rick Gibson, shown there with that Southern belt, or it was Jerry Lawler against Jackie Fargo with Rick Gibson in the corner. It was tremendous, and Rick Gibson was a great talent. And then in probably 77 or 78, little brother Robert Gibson came in. They put Robert and Rick. They had several runs in this territory as a tag team, a brother tag team. Obviously, Ricky ended up having a car wreck, and he ended up, that's being it for him for sure. But all that talent in the 70s, no wonder it was record breaking. And to continue on with the 70s, when I finish talking, I want you to talk about the Mongolian Stomper, Rocky Johnson, who made the debut in 76, Tommy Rich in 74, Plowboy Frazier in 76. Magnificent Zulu had a great run, even though the matches sucked. He sucked as a wrestler, but as a draw, he was great against the Mongolian and Stomper. So we'll start there and let you just final words on Ricky Gibson and Robert. Mongolian Stomper, Rocky Johnson. We don't have a picture, but Paul Orndorff drew a lot of money here during that time. Paul Orndorff, Rocky Johnson, Tommy Rich. Talk about that era of Memphis wrestling.
Let's start with the latter. And Tommy Rich. Tommy Rich was an outstanding football player at Hendersonville High School, and actually through the Jarretts, got into it, and excellent talent. I mean, he was already athletic. He had a good size on him. He was a good build. Had a great, people love his smile and that bleach blonde hair. And then he went quickly. He went up the ladder in this territory, and at that time it was Memphis and Nashville. And the next thing you knew, Paul Jones and Jim Barnett got him down to Atlanta, and then they really showcased him on national television on the Superstation on Channel 17 out of Nashville, which was the precursor to WCW, and it was NWA wrestling back then. And Tommy got to be really quick, really fast. And it's unfortunate that after the run in Atlanta, Tommy sort of self-destructed and self-imploded, and it cost him really the highlight it probably cost him the best years of his career. And I understand he's finally writing that book, and I'm anxious to read it because it's going to be supposedly a tell-all, so it's going to be a really interesting read. But Tommy Rich was an outstanding talent that was literally born in the backyard of Jarrett wrestling. You mentioned the Mongolian Stomper. I always thought that you talked about earlier in the show about how menacing the masked medics were, and indeed they were. But I always thought this guy was just brutal. And I had the chance to work with him a couple of times, and his build and his physique, and he had a lot of self-pride in himself and how he looked and how he came off on television and in the matches. And he was a consummate professional, without a doubt. Then you also mentioned who else did you mention there? You mentioned Tommy.
One of the things I want to say real quick that Randy West.
There's The Rock.
Obviously, that's at the Hall of Fame ceremony when The Rock inducted his dad. I think that was in 2009. Real quick, Randy West says Tommy Rich's first match was in Tupelo, Mississippi. He wanted to throw that in, and that's absolutely true. Jeff the Frog Wheeler, just as this show is laid out and researched and in order, but for some reason, Jeff Frog Wheeler writes Terry and Dory Funk. I mentioned earlier we didn't have a picture of Terry Funk, but I mentioned Terry Funk early in the world title chases. In 1975, Terry Funk defended the world title against. He never challenged Dory Jr. for the title. Dory Jr. was a champion from 68 to 73. Terry Funk won it. Briscoe won it in 73. Race won it in 73. Then Briscoe then lost it to Funk in 75. Came in for the thing. The best of the Funk Lawler feud was in the 1980s. Frank Seaton says, I read somewhere where Race didn't have a problem putting the strap on Rich because he was so over with the fans. And
that was a quick turn. Tommy didn't hold it that long. That was a quick
3
change
days.
on that. Yes. That was a quick turn.
3 days. So talk a little bit of what an impact Rocky Johnson coming in as a boxer and that sort of thing. Then we did talk about Tommy Rich. Got to talk about Plowboy Frazier as well, a big part of the 70s. Again, a lot to impact.
Rocky came in fact, was living in Nashville. In fact, The Rock, in one of his biographies, mentioned the fact that he went to McGavock High School. And, Rocky came in. He was one of these athletes that was proud of his body. He worked out every day. He was muscular. They brought him in with the reputation of being a boxer. And then he became a professional wrestler. Actually he was a boxer and a wrestler, and they brought him in as a quote unquote boxer. And then he got involved as a wrestler. But, he was, of course, the son-in-law of Peter Maivia, who ran Hawaii and the islands and all. And that was a huge area and a big territory. And Rocky, I can remember that's when I got involved for the first time as an announcer, when Jerry Jarrett came to me actually it was Jerry Lawler that came to me at WMPS in Memphis in March of 1976. No, 77. And I
Yes.
ended up filling in on 4 shows between after Jerry had broke off. They had an announcer team that for 2 weeks it just didn't go. And they
Clay
brought me in.
Conrad and Bob Young.
That was it.
Bob Young.
And so I came in and we were taping matches at the Cook Convention Center in Memphis for 4 weeks. And then Lance and Dave Lance got hired over at Channel 5, and they got Channel 5 TV. Of course, they had Channel 5 TV because of Lance. And then they brought Dave over as their weather guy, and that sealed the deal. And then from then on, it's just almost too great to talk about, because you can never do it justice for as good as those guys were.
There's no doubt about that for sure. Speak on Plowboy Frazier.
He was more of a gimmick wrestler in that he wasn't a real worker. He was just big, and he was brawny, and he was from Mississippi, and everybody knew he was a good old country boy. His persona expounded and really put him more so over than his wrestling ability. Made a big impact on Memphis wrestling, and made even a bigger impact in New York with Vince Jr.
One of the things is I got to get up early in the morning, got to do 953theticket.com tomorrow with Bud Chappelle, as in the last hour, the 9 o'clock hour, for the first 30 minutes of the 9 o'clock hour, no phone calls. I'm going to put Bud Chappelle on the hot seat. I'll ask the questions. I will put him in an uncomfortable situation, as he some year did. Jeff Frog-Wheeler asked what year Jack Eaton announced. I can answer that question. He did in the 80s, a couple of times substituting when Lance or Dave was out of town. Also, when wrestling first went on TV at Channel 5 in the 50s before it moved to Channel 13, the sole announcer was Jack Eaton. No video proof of that. That's just history, that no video backing that up. But that's Big Jack Eaton's.
Does Jeff know what Jack Eaton's catchphrase was? Every big, great announcer in every city has a catchprise.
I know.
Do you remember?
I know, but we want to see if Jeff knew. We want to see if anybody at all. Randy West probably won't know because he didn't grow up watching Memphis television. Adam Dunn will probably do, and he wrote
Adam's right. Adam's correct.
He got it.
And so did
correct. Jeff. Jeff did too. Great Caesar's Ghost and Great Scott.
Great Scott, Great Caesar's Ghost.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. So I want to finish up the year of the 70s, and we might go a little over because I have one thing that I thought very interesting, and that's all we'll do. We won't get to the modern wrestling stuff today, but I have one little thing about the schedule back in the time that I think is very interesting. But stand by as we'll go with some pictures of people from the late 70s that drew money. It was big. It was when we were in a jam. Robert Fuller was the booker. He left. He was fired actually as the booker and left because his brother was in opposition in Knoxville with the Papos and the Garvins and that Bob Roop and those. And that's when Robert had to go. He's fired anyway, but he had to go anyway and took his entire crew. The Hill team that saved the territory and the gimmick match that saved the territory was the Tupelo concession stand brawl with these guys right here. The Blonde Bombers with Wayne Ferris, the future Honky Tonk Man. Then you also Larry Latham. The future Moon Dog Spot is that guy right there, Larry Latham, managed by Danny Davis. And that's one of the famous matches ever in the territory, and drew a lot of money. There you see the Southern Tag belts that I didn't like those belts. I like Danny Davis. I like Larry Latham. I like Wayne Ferris, the future Honky Tonk Man. And they were a great, great tag team as well. And
Randy, when I first looked at that picture, I thought that was Jamie Dundee managing them.
Oh no! I mean, Jamie Dundee was barely born.
I know, but that same kind of look.
The year of 1977 brought to Memphis the boy from New York City, the Boogie Woogie Man, handsome Jimmy Valiant came rolling into Memphis. TWA, tell all the ladies, handsome Jimmy's on the way. He was a rocker, a roller, little funky tune. Tell all the ladies, handsome Jimmy Valiant is cool and frank. The Blonde Bombers probably lasted together from 78 to 82. Of course, the honky tonk man for Wayne Ferris made him a lot more money. And as a Moondog Spot made Larry a lot more money. So I am sure that they don't regret that. One of the most, we use the word a lot, menacing on this show today. Another menacing guy came into the territory in late 78, early 79, was the Canadian lumberjack Joe LeDuc. Man, the classic, iconic TV5 picture with Lance Russell holding the mic and Joe LeDuc making that blood oath. I'm throwing a lot of stuff at Michael to wrap this part of the list up. Some great young talent started in the late 70s. And we'll start with the guy that would end up becoming Hot Stuff. The guy from one of the first families of Memphis wrestling, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. And this, I think, Michael, is Eddie Gilbert's first promo picture from back in the day. He wasn't the only one. About the same area, a very young pre-Birdman Coco Ware before Coco Beware. Look at this hot shot, this athletic guy, this football player from Union City, Tennessee, high school football. It was certainly Coco Ware. Another young kid, a young kid that started in the late 70s, would later become famous as part of the Rock and Roll Express. And that, of course, is Rick Morton. Rick Morton, as you see him there with Robert, just fantastic. Another guy that started on your end, started on the Chattanooga end, is from, because he is the pride of Huntsville, Alabama. And that's my friend who passed away in 2021 at 62 years old. Beautiful Bobby Eaton. Another guy I gotta throw in. I love Bobby to death. One of the nicest guys ever. We certainly already talked about Terry Funk, Harley Race, Jack Briscoe. You can't talk about the late 70s without talking about two guys. One guy that was here a long time. One guy was in other places pretty quick because he would become one of the biggest box offices in the history of wrestling. Hulk Hogan. And the great video, Michael St. John did the audio of Hulk Hogan. And there is that iconic early picture of Hulk Hogan. And also, certainly, for many, many years, the top heel manager of the territory, the mouth of the South. He would later become Jimmy Hart. And I believe we may have a picture of Jimmy Hart and Jerry Lawler together. If we don't have a picture of Jimmy Hart, I think everybody watching this show knows what Jimmy Hart looks like. And I might have deleted that earlier. And so, Adam, if it's there, put it up there, and you're not putting it up there, so I don't guess we have it. There we go. There's the picture of Jerry Lawler and Jimmy Hart together. So you have a lot to unpack with the Blonde Bombers, Valiant, LeDuc, Gilbert, Coco, Morton, Bobby Eaton, Jimmy Hart, and Hulk Hogan. Michael St. John.
Wow, they all have their own stories, and they're all pretty unique. The Blonde Bombers were sort of I won't say a new tag team, but they really sort of reconditioned some of the old things you used to see. And they were the first ones that had to finish off the top rope. And, they were a great, formidable tag team. They were on Nick's side. They came over the Memphis side. They were even bigger. All three of them became stars. I mean, Danny's retired down in where the Hurricanes headed right now. And we lost Moondog Spot a while back, but Larry Latham was as tough of a customer. He's the first guy I ever saw take a chair shot full blown in the head and never put his hands up. I mean, he just took the shot. And then the Honky Tonk Man, I've listened to a couple of his podcasts, and at times, and when he's reflecting and doing the historical stuff, I think he's really good. But sometimes he's a little bitter, which I'm surprised because he really had a successful career and a good career. Is he in the WWF Hall of Fame or the WWE Hall of Fame, or has he been sort of blackballed out of that?
I don't think he is in that at all. I really don't think he is in that at all, Michael.
I think that's a sore subject. I think that's a sore spot there, and for whatever reason, and that's of interest. But they were a good tag team. Joe LeDuc was just out of this world. He is in. Okay. So Honky Tonk is in the Hall of Fame. So I retract that. But Joe LeDuc was he came in the territory. He was a shock guy. He was a shock jock. He was the shock jock of his era for wrestling in this territory. He was totally different. He was as tough as they came. Had that little head niche, that little head click, or that tick that he'd move his head in a weird sort of way, which put him over even more. But he was certainly unique. But I classify him as more of a shock jock kind of wrestler. Still good, but a shock jock. Ricky Morton, we talked about a little bit earlier, second generation wrestler, still around, still can work, still can go. His son's a wrestler now, so he's a third generation wrestler. Who else do we have on that package that you just handed
You
off?
mentioned Joe LeDuc, right?
Yes, I did. I talked about Joe.
One of the scariest guys. Of course, Eddie Gilbert, Coco Ware, and Rick Morton.
Coco Ware is an interesting. We had him early on in Nashville on Nick's side of the territory, and you could just tell that Coco Ware was a star in the making once he just got his gimmick and his legs under him as a professional wrestler. He was a great football player, I understand, in high school up in Union City, and he could talk it. He could walk the walk and talk the talk. And once he got to New York, I mean, he was one of the early superstars that got over not only by wrestling, but by his gimmick and the bird and his bird with him. And last time I saw him, I was at Brian Lawler's funeral and Brian Christopher's funeral, and I saw him then, and he looked fabulous. He gained a little weight, but he really looked just like he always looked. And the decade, the 80s as it came in was a whole different thing, like we said early on in the show in wrestling, as when it went out, because all of a sudden, as you were going out, you were getting these superstars that were taking advantage of what was really social media of its day with music videos and with entry music, and they were becoming a new brand of star in professional wrestling. Frankie was the bird, and I want to thank Al for that. But it was a whole different era being ushered in. And when you look back, and you got to point to Memphis wrestling, because it was really the breeding ground for that type of star that ended up going to the WWE or going to WCW. But Memphis was really that breeding ground. And it started at about 1977, 78, coincidentally, when Jerry Jarrett took over the territory, and just blossomed right on into the 90s after that.
Bobby Eaton.
Loved Bobby. Spent Saturday night here in Arab, Alabama with him 2 weeks before he passed. and the Jack Lord was doing a show, and they honored Bobby at the show, and then Bobby crowned their champion. They had a local champion or whatever, and Bobby was there for it, and he wouldn't let me leave. I'll never forget this about he and Arvel Hutto were there, and Bobby had some gimmicks he was selling, and he had him on the radio on the morning show a week or so before that, talking about the matches with him and Jack Lord, and he wouldn't let me leave that night. He was like, let's just stay here and let's talk. Stay here and let's talk. And then little did I know that 6 weeks later I would have the honor to be one of 3 speakers at his funeral. And Bobby, I can remember knowing Bobby when he first broke in with Nick, and Nick paired him up with George because he knew Bobby was a great worker, and George could shine off of him. And actually took a couple of car rides. We did a match over in Gurley, Alabama at the Madison County High School one Saturday night. I was in town, and George asked me if I'd go out and do the introductions and so forth. And I did, and rode with he and Bobby. And Bobby was just one of the nicest man in wrestling. I think we could just crown him that title now and it be done with. Bobby that didn't have a bad word for anybody. He was smart as he got more involved into the wrestling ring, the wrestling arena, and the sport. He got bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger and better. And even when he retired and started having back problems and a little bit of dementia and all that, he was still so knowledgeable about wrestling and so willing to help. Boys would come up to him. In fact, in Arab that night, a guy came up to him and asked him, he said, "Did you watch my match?" And Bobby said, "Yeah, well, what did I do wrong? What can I improve?" And Bobby went into like a 10-minute explanation of how he could get better. And that was just Bobby. This is a good note to sort of close out this part of the show, is that, nobody, I don't think, will ever say a bad word about Bobby Eaton. And I don't think I ever heard Bobby Eaton say a bad word about anybody.
I have one more guy I want you to spend just about a minute on, because certainly you can read any media, certainly, but there's only one person that's watching the show or on this show that did the debut audio for Hulk Hogan as a professional wrestler. That was Michael St. John. Hulk Hogan.
I did this video, and I never met the man until 1998. He worked Memphis. He was supposed to come to Nashville. We were supposed to do a thing where I was going to go down. They were going to tape the match he was in. I was going to do the commentary, and then they were going to do an interview. And he left the territory. And Randy, I don't think he was in the territory more than 6 weeks, was he?
No, it was 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. It was very short. And real quick, Frog Wheeler asking if Bobby and Norvell Austin teamed together. And I don't remember them teaming together at all. Bobby did team as part of the Midnight Express. The very first Midnight Express team was the 3-man of Norvell Austin, Dennis Condrey, and Randy Rose as a heel group. That was very exciting. Now, I want to close with the final segment before we go into our plugs and all that. Michael, you're going to have to help me with this, because I don't know, and in a book I have, and I meant to grab something, and I'll set you off in the direction, and as I read this, and then I'll go grab the Mark James book with the schedule. This schedule basically has a couple of next towns. You may fill in some of the dates. We'll start with we'll talk about January of 1973. They were off on January the 1st on a Sunday. Then on a Tuesday, they were off on a Monday. They were off on the Monday the 1st. On the 2nd, Memphis ran on Tuesday. Off on Monday. Memphis ran on Tuesday. Louisville ran on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the 3rd, Evansville and Nashville. On the 6th, Chattanooga on a Thursday night, and Jackson, Tennessee on a Thursday night. Then it didn't list Friday or Saturday. Friday on the Memphis end was Tupelo, Mississippi or Blytheville, Arkansas. On the Nick end, what was the normal Friday town, Michael?
It was Huntsville or Bowling Green.
Okay. All right. Saturday town during this time period was Memphis TV, then Jonesboro at night. What was next Saturday town?
Chattanooga, every Saturday at the City Auditorium.
At this point in the early 70s, Chattanooga was a Thursday town, according to this schedule. It was every Thursday.
When I got involved and had been for several years, Chattanooga was the Saturday night town. They would run Channel 12 TV that afternoon. In fact, it ran, TV ran from 1 until 3. And and 1 till 3. And then they would stay over and run TV that night, because at that point they had taken TV in Birmingham and it was a bicycle tape. It was no longer live in Huntsville or Birmingham on Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening. So Chattanooga became the Saturday town. I think that's what made Chattanooga, or created when they moved Chattanooga from being the what you're talking about and moved it to Saturday, was when TV went off live in Chattanooga, or went off Birmingham TV live and Huntsville TV live. Nick didn't have to have two crews making that trip and ending up in Birmingham on a Saturday, because they'd have morning TV in Nashville, a 4:00 show in Huntsville, or I'm sorry, a 4:00 show in Chattanooga, a 5:00 show in Huntsville, and then a 10:30 show in Birmingham. And remember, not all the freeways were completed back then.
Oh yeah, it was a mess. So on Monday the 15th, it was Birmingham and Memphis, two major cities in the South. On Tuesdays, it was Louisville, and that's all that's listed. On Wednesday, this is the 17th, it was Nashville and Evansville. On 18th, it was Chattanooga. Then didn't list anything for Friday or Saturday. Michael said Bowling Green or Huntsville. And then we still hadn't, before Chattanooga moved from Thursday to Saturday, wonder what that Saturday town was. A spot show?
Probably
Columbia,
spot show.
Maybe?
Just spot shows, just wherever. You mentioned Evansville. When did Jerry move Evansville? When Evansville on Thursday night at one point?
Always Wednesday.
Okay.
Always right. Wednesday, yeah. And so this is the deal. Mondays were Memphis and Birmingham. Tuesdays was Louisville. Evansville was Nashville and Evansville. Thursday was Jackson, Tennessee and Chattanooga. And then Friday was Huntsville, Bowling Green, Tupelo and Bible. And that was the.
And Saturday was TVs and spot shows.
Jonesboro for many years, and eventually Chattanooga on Saturdays. And after that, it became Nashville on Saturday night. So I thought it was just very interesting to look at that schedule, Michael.
Well, I think Jeff Wheeler made an interesting question. How many modern day stars you think could wrestle a territory schedule? Not very many. And only ones that have maybe been exposed to it before they came to the teams that they're with now, or the groups they're with now. There's not very many of these boys, I think, could do that. Could not, do that schedule.
No, I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, absolutely. Plus, many of the boys now, I don't know if I don't want to travel with them. If you think about it, the way I understand it, it's good that things are more politically correct. It's good that the drugs and booze and all that stuff apparently is a thing of the past, an abusive type of deal. I mean, they're more professional and athletic and in the gym, and they're boring. They are just boring. I mean, we had a deal that I wanted to get to, and we're going to save it for next week. But just all the great road stories and we'll have a bunch of a list of songs we used to sing and butcher and go crazy, and we'll talk about that. But we'll talk about some of these stories, Michael, and we'll let you respond. Final comments about today's show and what you look forward to about next week's show. These are the Randy Hills stories that I'll tell next week. I will tell the Randy Hills Whoopie D ice trip from hell where we both thought we were dying in 1994. I'll tell Whoopi wrecking Randy's car a few years later. I will talk Kurt Hennig, Brian Knobs with the Nasty Boys, and Jeff Jarrett. Maybe some wacky backy might be involved in that story with Kurt Hennig. And my first experience with wacky backy took place in that trip with Kurt and Brian. Funny story. The famous Frank Morrell, Randy Hills race story in Louisville, a funny Frank and Randy weed story that we overshot the runway by 150 miles. Thought I was driving and smoking. Frank said, "Man, I got some good Kentucky stuff, man." We took off to Springfield from exit 97, should have taken 10 minutes. And finally, I looked up. We were laughing and joking, having a good time. I said, "Frank," now I'm telling the story now, and I just wanted to say it's coming. But I said, "Frank, it says 15 miles to Louisville." I had driven to Louisville. So I'll tell a funny Owensboro, Kentucky story. I'll have to clean it up. A funny Crazy Gail, Bad Bob story I'll have to clean up. A Sugar Tree truck stop at the old 126. I won't have to clean that up because that's just a funny story. Tojo and the hitchhiker story. Tojo getting the wrong car. Snow sledding with Whoopi, Road Dog, and Tex Schlesinger. Using acid at Opryland. Getting busted by weed by Lawler Steiner. Saving the RH twice. A Everett, Kentucky riot. Slapping Billy Travis while drunk. Randy Hales going crazy and doing a Jim Cornette by throwing a Coke at a fast food guy at Kentucky Fried Chicken in Mississippi. And also we will talk about the one road wreck. Randy West and I were scheduled to go to Springfield, Tennessee, and some teenager new to drive and lost control on that Cumberland Hills drive, and we had a head-on wreck. Called Jerry Jarrett, came, brought the limousine down. We took the camera stuff out of the Randy's truck or van, put it all, loaded it up in the limo, dropped Jerry Jarrett back off at the house, and then we made the town and was not even late. So you think we can get some mileage out of the show next week there, Michael, my man?
If I can steal the old CBS thing, On the Road with Randy Hales.
All right. Final words about today's show that I thought this is not a typical video show. And we've been having, for some reason on Tuesday night, no problems on Monday. So we're having video problem. This show is certainly in its origins, or in its beginning, was a talk show. And I think as long as we have subjects like today, I didn't think we missed the videos at all. Did you, Michael? This was a dynamite show.
The only reason I missed the videos, I didn't get to go up and go to the bathroom. But other than that, it's good. I love it. It's a great show. You did some great research on this, Randy, and you started the show by saying you think you're the most famous person out of your high school class. I don't think there's any question. I just, the work you do, if people really knew the work you did during the week just to get this show on the air and us talking about it, and the great work that Adam Dunn does behind the scenes is incredible.
He's the most valuable player of the show. And
well,
he really
you guys
is. It wouldn't look like this.
Players. You guys are, and I really enjoyed. I enjoy what we did tonight as much, if not better, than anything we've ever done. It just rolls, and you get to talk about things, and you start bringing up names and stuff, and it triggers a memory or a thought or a match or a night or whatever. And it's just cool. It's cool as you would say, instant off the cuff radio and TV.
Oh yeah, and there's nothing like live. I mean, probably if we pre-recorded this, I'm sure you can edit it and you get it smooth and all this. This is just great organic live stuff, and you read the notes. Pat and Chris, they read the notes, but I go different places. I never, I change up as we go along because it's just I go with what feels right. And Mike says extremely formative, and Al says uh, great show once again. Tony Edwards, looking forward to the show next week. So, real quick, final words, Michael.
Well, congratulations to the New York Yankees. They clinched the pennant in the American League East tonight. Aaron Judd did not hit his 61st home run. I'm watching the Yankees every night. I'm really rooting for Aaron Judd.
I don't think he's going to make it. I'm plugging for him too. But what do they have? 6 games left?
Yeah, I think there is 6 games left, and they were in Toronto tonight. I think they've got a day game tomorrow in Toronto. But I'm like you, Randy. He's sort of tightened up, and every pitcher is
too much pressure, man.
And they're pitching him away. So
yeah, what did you think about? Even though it was on Apple TV, but we saw the highlights. What did you think about Albert hitting the 2? I thought that was great. I
did too. And having lived in St. Louis and knowing what that town's all about with baseball, I told Melanie, I said, for this night only or this day only, I would love to be in St. Louis after this game because there were great parties. The whole city celebrated one man's accomplishment. And St. Louis is very much like that. It's a sports town. It's a great sports town. It's my favorite sports town I've ever lived in. But Cardinal baseball is special. And when Pujols did that, you could almost hear the roar all the way down the river to Memphis. That was outstanding. I do want to update you on one thing. I just got an update while you were closing up, Randy, from Channel 11 in Louisville. WHAS has a sister station, WFLA, down in Tampa. They have a live shot of Tampa Bay right now, and the early remnants of the hurricane, or the early movement of the hurricane, is beginning to make landfall. The tides are up. There's an onshore flow into the Tampa Bay right now. So over the next 36 hours, it's going to be very interesting in and around everything north of Sarasota to about Tarpon Springs and inland for the landing of the hurricane in America. And it's going to get interesting. We just hope and pray for everybody in Florida and in the areas that are going to be affected, that everybody stays safe and does the right thing to be safe, and Godspeed and God be with them.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being with us today. This was absolutely fantastic. Remember, I'll be on the front row with Bud Row. I will be on there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and for the first 30 minutes of this show, I am going to put Bud Row on the hot shit seat, as I have about 10 questions for him. He don't know what's coming, but I'm going to get my revenge. He asked me a hard question. I am going to turn the tables. 953theticket.com. And as we close, we'll have Michael on the screen with me for this final part. As I like the new way I've started, everybody can see Michael as we go off the show on a Tuesday night on Talking Memphis Wrestling, as we're waiting for Adam, and he might have gone away because he's not putting Michael on the screen side by side as I go for this close. So I will do it anyway, and I hope Adam is around to get us off the air. As Tony says, everyone that hadn't bought Randy's book yet, I highly recommend it. And there is Michael and his buddy. Also, remember, everybody, the new Randall Hales YouTube page, Randall Hales YouTube page. Be sure to subscribe. Tell us the cat's name again, Michael.
That is Jazz. And Jazz is down here every show. She sits to my left when she's not on camera. and she listens and watches everything that goes on screen. It's the most amazing thing. But every now and then I like to get her on. She had her paw in my hand because she thought we were getting ready to get off, and she knows that when I'm finished, I give her some treats. So that's what she's waiting on. But great show, Randy. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I really am humbled and honored by the fact that I get to do this every week with you. And thank you so much for your friendship.
Michael is saying he can't do anything, so I will have to take over on directing this sucker. And
Randy, I'm going to go ahead and leave here if I may. I'm just
you may, and so that'll help you go away, Michael. And
see you next Tuesday. Thank you, friend.
We'll see you next Tuesday night. The great Michael St. John. Everybody, we appreciate him every week. And folks, as I am trying to look at what's going on here, okay, very good. Make it real simple to wrap it up for Michael St. John. This is ORH, and I'm out.
Talking Memphis Wrestling with Randy Hales, featuring Michael St. John, Pat Trammell, and special guests.
Living the Dream, Memphis Wrestling, The Randy Hales Story, is available now at randyhalesmemphiswrestling.com.